Okay, since the mayor, well, until the mayor gets here, I'll go ahead and chair the meeting and get us started. For the City Council Finance Committee meeting for February 20th. And we've got 3 items on the agenda. The first one is the discussion regarding the FYE 25-26 City of Norman budget. And do we want to do that one first? I see that the audit is pulled up, but.
I think we didn't have
Okay. All right, well then we'll start with that first item of discussion. We have Finance Director here with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your packet are various reports and information from some of the outside agencies that are requesting general fund funding in the fiscal year 26 budget. And I would remind you that this is just requests for additional funding from the general fund. Some of these agencies get funding from other sources, United Way or room tax, that sort of thing, but this is just where the council has made a special appropriation from the general fund for various programs that they contract with the city for. On the second page of your package, you see kind of what is the request for fiscal year 26 from each of the agencies, and if there is any requested increase, that's highlighted for you. Historically speaking, for the last 3 or 4 years at least, we have only heard from those agencies that are requesting an increase. In past years, all of the agencies made some statements about their programs and that sort of thing, so it's totally up to you about what they would do. But again, we would suggest that you hear from those agencies that are asking for a request. They are the Social and Voluntary Services Committee, the Firehouse Arts Center, the Cleveland County Historical Museum, the Performing Arts Studio, and the Norman Music Festival. The Social and Voluntary Services Committee is asking for a $25,000 increase to their budget, which is in this current fiscal year $250,000, so that's about a 10% increase. And I would remind you that the SVSC budget has increased over 10 years or so, from $50,000 to this request for $275,000. The Firehouse Arts Center, as you see there, had a substantial increase in fiscal year 24, and they're requesting an additional increase of about 25% from what they are budgeted in 25. The Historical Museum is requesting about a 20% increase, $5,500. The Performing Arts Studio is requesting a $5,700 increase, which is about 10%. And then the Norman Music Festival is requesting a substantial increase of about 400% from the $10,000 that they're budgeted in this fiscal year to $50,000 in proposed budget for fiscal year 26. Again, whatever you direct us to do will be considered in the city manager's proposed budget. We've usually just gone with what you recommend, but again, what comes out in the city manager's proposed budget for these agencies and everything else for that matter will be at the final discretion of the council.
Councilmember Grant.
So we'll hear from those organizations that are here about their funding increases. But just so we're all on the same page, the outlook for the city budget over the next 5 years is kind of stagnant still.
At best.
At best.
Yes.
Okay. All right, just so everybody in the room knows.
Any further comment about that specific part from anybody?
We might start with the Social and Voluntary Services Committee. There's a representative here.
Lisa Chris, Planning Department. Tara Reynolds and I staff the SVSC for the City of Norman. Well, what we have done is each year the commission goes through an application process, whereas nonprofit organizations can apply for up to $10,000 from the city of Norman. And so in current year, FYE 25, we received 35 applications requesting a total of $332,523. Each year, more and more, just kind of keeps creeping up. The commission goes through a process to evaluate the applications and determine the funding amounts for each one. I believe that was included in your packet as the current applicants that are funded this year. The one thing unique about SVSC is that it is one of the few funding sources that are eligible for general operations expenses, basically keeping the lights on. Whereas most funding sources to foundations and other grants require it to be for a specific program or a designated output. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Councilmember Dixon?
Who else on this committee? Is it on our webpage?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Currently we have
6 commissioners.
6 commissioners
Perfect.
with several vacancies that we're hoping to get filled soon. So, and it's not a word-specific appointment, so.
All right, any further comments or questions for social and voluntary service?
Is there a list of the applicants who asked for money and like weren't?
Weren't funded,
Yes.
we can get that for you.
Okay.
Usually it is someone that is a not-for-profit organization and not a 501c3 that applies. We have had several instances in the past couple years where we've had applications from agencies that are faith-based, that are doing faith-based things such as counseling and things like that we run those through legal for their determination on those. And so all the applications that were funded there were several faith-based organizations on there, but they're for just general purposes. So,
Councilmember Montoya?
What is the cause for the increase in the request?
Because we received just such a demand, in I think it was in 2019, we capped it at $10,000 per ask because we were getting asked, like you guys, for $40,000 and $50,000 a shot. And then we were getting asks for $1,000. And the committee was having a really hard time trying to weigh those two. And so the committee came up with a limit of $10,000 per application, per agency. You can have more than one application, but they can't exceed $10,000. So,
All right, thanks.
Yeah, I think that's on page 5 in the packet of the agencies, and the maximum amount being 10,000 for each of them, so. Okay, any other questions for them, Councilmember Dixon?
Are there members on the committee who also represent agencies and
Yes.
like their stuff got funded or
there are,
as a request to
and
get funded?
the way I have always looked at this is that for someone to serve on social and voluntary services, they have to be passionate about the services that are provided in this town. We give them a little pep talk as we get started about boundaries, and if I feel anybody is going outside those, I call them out. It really has not been an issue. We all publicly state any conflicts we may have through the process, so everybody knows what's going on.
Perfect, thank you.
Now, Firehouse Arts Center will be next.
How's it going? Andy Couch, I'm the executive director and curator of the Firehouse. Good to see you all. In our report, you will notice that our attendance has doubled over the past year. This current year, we're going to triple it. So the demand is a lot higher. You'll see in that summary of participants. We've also moved our budget up to about $700,000 due to just the use of the space and the demand that we're having now. We're kind of firing on all cylinders, you might say, in terms of classes and programs. We're collaborating with a lot of different communities now within Norman and Oklahoma City. Something that we've done this past year is started a partnership with Norman Public Schools. It's called the Art Sparks program. So we are doing two outreach programs, a pre-visit and a post-visit, and then a field trip to all fifth grade students. I don't know how many of you know, but there is not any visual arts education in our primary elementary schools until sixth grade. So out of those 14 Title I schools, we're trying our best to serve all of them, and then develop this program for first, second, third, and fourth grades. So applying for a lot of grants is what I do, as many as we can. But this pilot program with the Norman Public School Foundation and the Norman Public School System, the Fine Arts Department, has gone really, really well. It's been really well received by all of our teachers and a lot of our schools. So I'm hoping we can hire a full-time art educator to be able to serve that, because I guess it is too great of a number to do that in our public schools. So we've kind of been the facilitator for that. Happy to entertain any questions.
Questions for Firehouse? Comments? Councilmember Graham?
If we keep funding the same as last year's, will that make or break you coming into the?
For the fifth grade program, it would be very difficult to continue that. I would have to cut back on either other positions or make a really hard decision on finding funding for that program.
Okay, appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Next would be the Historical Museum.
Okay. Depot.
Performing Arts Studio.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sherry Jackson. I'm Executive Director at the Depot. Our legal name is still our founding name, which was the Performing Arts Studio, but we live in the historic train station. Last year, we came to the council. We had wanted to do so several years back, but we were in a budget situation that we felt like that ask was not a tenable ask, or one that we thought we could make. So we came last year to ask for an increase to our funding. For about 20 years, the Depot has been running a 365-day-a-year waiting room for the Amtrak train service that takes place in the Depot, and all of the associated staffing costs, supplies, cleaning, and everything we had pretty much been subsidizing. So we came to the city last year to ask for a little support so that we could pay for at the Depot, during our gallery hours, the staffing that it needs to handle the 15 to 20 phone calls a day, the 10 or 15 people that walk in every day asking for directions, the train schedules that we print, the coordination that it takes for us to coordinate with parking services and everyone else for the care of that building, and the fabulous maintenance staff from Parks and Recreation who helps take care of that building. So we put an estimate in place last year of it taking around, for 365 days a year, for the cleaning, the staff, the supplies, the everything else, the paper goods, the maintenance that we do, an estimate of $50,000. And after taking care of that at the level that we really wanted to for the last year, we discovered that it might take a tiny bit more, so we're only asking for $5,000 more. We do not subsidize any of our arts program for the community with that money. That is directly the money that it takes for the robust operation of an Amtrak service waiting room, which is part of the city's deal with getting that building as a gift. And we are happy to facilitate that service. Our ask from the city is that we get some funding to help support the creation of that, which we think at about $55,000 is probably a bargain for 365 days a year. We're very excited for those of you that may or may not be terribly aware. We're also at the Depot, joining in some of the conversations and reaching out to the members of the Rail Transit Authority board team as they have a conversation about the vote that's taking place in 2026 to create a regional transit hub. There's also conversation at the Amtrak level potentially about making the Heartland Flyer 2 ways so that we would have 2 trains a day instead of 1. And just so that you know, we at the Depot are taking the long view toward planning our programming. We operate in that room comedy, poetry, we do concert series. We are one of the best-selling art galleries in our community that has well-known artists from throughout Oklahoma or those with very strong Oklahoma ties in our gallery. We serve around 30,000 people a year from our arts programming, including Summer Breeze in Lions Park. That concert series is produced by us as well. But when we take the long view to our programming, we hopefully want to grow into the place that becomes Grand Central Station for Norman, Oklahoma. Really robust arts programming all around it, and a fabulous way for visitors to land in the city of Norman. So that's why we're asking for a slight increase. It's just to cover toilet paper, paper towels, cleaning services, and the staff it takes to answer the questions.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Happy to answer.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, absolutely.
All right.
Finally, would be the Norman Music Festival.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sherry. And I am Executive Director of the Norman Music Alliance that produces the Norman Music Festival. And we know that this one is maybe outside the norm for asks, and we are well respectful of that. But the Norman Music Alliance was a group of weirdos in 2008 that thought they'd ask the city if they could shut down the street and pop a stage and see what happens. And 15,000 people showed up that first year. And now we are the largest music event in the state of Oklahoma. We had record crowds last Friday before we had to cancel due to tornadoes last year, which was awful. But on a side note, I don't think I've ever been prouder of any team of people who, through absolute tears after having a year of planning go down the drains and our Grammy Award nominated headliner not be able to take the stage, spent 6 hours on a very tired day making sure that every piece of equipment was down and every person was out of harm's way before that weather rolled in. So we are the largest music event. We now work closely with the Oklahoma Film and Music Office as we all try to brainstorm together how to bring the power of music and the music industry in Oklahoma and keep it here and make it centered in Norman. For those of you that might not know, the Oklahoma talent that is now on national stages is extraordinary in every genre. We have artists that we regularly put at our festival that are now signed to national record labels. They are on festival posters for some of the biggest festivals in the country. And what sadly has to happen is that the amazing talent that we've got here can create music here. They can even record here. But then if they want a career, they have to leave Oklahoma. The mid-level of the music industry isn't there. And us, in conjunction with our partners at ACM at UCO, the Oklahoma Film and Music Office, and several others, are really working to take a look on what it looks like to keep all of that business and all of that economy here. Because imagine the dollars if you just look at country music and look at Garth, Reba, and Blake. Imagine those three people in their industries and their recording and all of the power of that creativity being here in Oklahoma instead of leaving and heading for a coast. The Norman Music Festival brings about 75,000 people downtown. We love the tools that Parks and Rec has that we get from Sarah Kaplan so that we can identify unique visitors. Every festival traces its attendees different. It used to be a real norm that you would estimate how many people might rotate in over the course of a weekend, how many average hours they stayed. We used algorithms for counting. We used to estimate about 100. Now we're looking at just unique visitors. And we figure around 70,000 people who come multiple times over the weekend over 3 days. We broke all records. We had 26,000 people downtown on Friday night. We know from the tracer that we had people fly in from at least 8 states to come to Norman Music Festival and fill up our hotels. And our estimated economic impact on the weekend is about $3.5 million that benefits mostly our downtown Norman local businesses. That's our generated economic activity on the weekend. So What we're asking for a little money to help us partner with is we work so well. We just had our all-city meeting to work with every city department for all of the logistics. We love being able to work so closely with all of those departments, but it takes extra barriers that we have to pay for. It takes extra fencing that we have to pay for and bring in. It takes portable toilets. We have to spend $12,000 in generators because the grid for OG&E isn't robust enough for us to be able to plug in stages in downtown. So what we're asking for is, again, not to pay some artists, that's on us. We gotta raise that money. Not for the lights and the pretties, that's on us. But for help facilitating the container that allows this beautiful thing to happen and some logistical help on that side. So that's our ask for you. We're hoping this is the right place to make that ask. If it's not, I'll entertain any directional assistance you'd like to get, or any questions you've got. Yes,
Councilor Nash?
How much is that intended to be used for like advertising and
Zero.
marketing?
So here's the beautiful part. Our marketing budget's sitting right there. The marketing budget, and this may be the most amazing fact about the Norman Music Festival, our budget to date for marketing remains $0. We have never put any money into advertising. This amazing festival, and now we get calls from Austin Psych Fest, who's a new partner, and the festival in Lincoln, Nebraska called Lincoln Calling, who called us asking how we do what we do. It's strictly boots on the ground, word of mouth. This thing has grown because people love it and keep coming back. We haven't spent any money, and we don't intend to spend big splashing money.
Well, that's impressive. I'd be a little more comfortable if there was a marketing intent for the budget increase, because bringing in more money, increasing that potentially at $3.5 million in economic activity. If we're all in sales, it's $105,000
So
dedicated sales tax that we'd benefit from.
I would happily allocate some to that if it was earmarked for that. One of the things we absolutely want to do and we're doing this year, last year we looked and we estimate that our best target markets for bringing additional visitors to Norman are probably those we hadn't anticipated that people would fly in from 8 states. We didn't know that this was a get on a plane destination festival. Our estimation is within a tank of gas for a free festival. So we start looking at Kansas City, we look at the Dallas metro area, San Antonio, we start looking at Arkansas. And we, this year, are targeting and bringing a couple of bands from Kansas City, and our target marketing with some Facebook and social media advertising that area to let them know about this festival. I'd happily allocate a little more because we really think with some concerted effort, we could make sure that all of those municipalities within a tank of gas understand exactly when NMF happens and how to get here.
Yeah, I mean, even with this amount that you're requesting, it sounds like this festival pays for itself.
So go ahead, so sorry.
Still, I feel like it could do better, and it would make just a soft commitment to doing a little bit of marketing to pull in even more people to benefit. Even more would be fantastic.
Happy to do that. It's absolutely our intention to be looking at external markets and trying to find out where there are really robust music scenes that we could do music trades with, where we can start advertising in their venues and to their audiences to make sure that we're trying to attract them here to Norman. And we had some success with it last year, and we're going to continue it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilor Grant?
Yes, ma'am.
So the 50K for this year though is like for porta potties, barriers, is it for pay for cops?
No, so currently to this date, we do not pay for the extra police, we don't pay directly for the extra police that come. We have minimized the need for that because we spend around $30,000, and I don't know that $20,000, I don't know that I included all of it in the budget, I'd have to revisit. The $20,000 is for a private security force that we handle to try to take the pressure off, so that all the crowd control at all of the stages and all of the places where we intend people to be walking in and out, the safety at railroad crossings, that all of that is manned by security staffing that we have hired. So that minimizes the need for our police to be there. They have a command center, which we appreciate very much, and have 5 or 6 people that are stationed there so that a pair can do some walking in case something more serious were to occur. But we pay for private security to handle most of those functions at the festival.
And, okay, so while I'm looking at current allocation request, the reason I'm asking
Please.
is it says 27,000.
That 27,000 is our private security, yes. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it said total, that's why I was a little confused, 50K versus
Oh, and I'm
27.
so sorry, it's written there on the bottom. So sorry, it's in small print.
Okay.
That's my bad. So 27,000 if you just wanted to do the container. The other part was some assistance to help with staffing. Currently, I am the only part-time employee of the Norman Music Festival. We have a few other people that we need to hire on the day to make sure things stay safe. We rely on volunteers to do that work and have since the very beginning. We currently have, let's say, a production staffer that knows all of our plans, that we pay out of pocket $3,000, that's been there for years to make sure those stages don't get in the way of street signs, that everything is put in safe places. I would love to have the freedom in the coming years to be able to pay someone to help with vendors. We also pay a private electrician that I didn't put in there, so some assistance to help us, some staffing of key positions. But that is secondary right now to, if we can start with a logistical container, I mean, we can limp along a little while longer with some volunteers. But the additional part is for some key staffing pieces that would make it run smoothly. Just so that you're all aware, the budget for this festival is around $280,000, and every other festival that we know that gets anywhere near our size has a multi-million-dollar budget and at least 5 employees. What we do, I cannot stress enough what an absolute unicorn NMF is that we've got in our backyard. It's a very special thing. And we're just trying to, we have signed our first 2 national level sponsors. We are trying to recruit more. In this current climate, we are watching sponsors claw back promises. Everything being as iffy as it is at the federal level. The market is very jittery right now with people wanting to make commitments. But it's a very small budget, and we'd love to see a few more people paid for their work because volunteers are great. But when they decide they're done for the day and take a break, you can't fire them or penalize them. They just go, and then all of a sudden you've got a gap and you're scrambling to fill it.
And then I would just say I deviate a little bit from Councilmember Nash on the budget, maybe someday in the future, but as I understand it, Visit Norman has like a whole line item, and that's kind of their job is to promote and place ads for people. Have they
We
not
would-
done that for y'all?
Not really, no, and we would love to see that kind of help. So I am working to try to make some inroads there to see if we can't get some Visit Norman assistance to try to help beef up some ads and target marketing. It'd be great.
A whole line item for marketing and all
Yeah,
that.
if I could speak on marketing just for a second, just because being the person that sits in it, like
the
we've
one who does it.
done, we've, like, you ask about more marketing to bring more people in. We've been very intentional about how we market this festival, because if we market it to the wide areas, and we had done that, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, pre-COVID, I mean, we already bring, like, on any given, like, the big night, Saturday night, anywhere from 25 to 30,000. If we were to bring 60,000 people, you shut down downtown. I mean, that's a crazy amount of people. So we've been very intentional about how we market it to make sure that we keep it sustainable as we grow. And so now we feel like we're in a place to start doing the target marketing in these areas, to start growing our audience. We found out when we did our numbers that 70% of the people who attend are from this area, and the other 30% make up the outside coming in. We would like to grow that 30%, but we want to do it sustainably, and we want to do it right, so that we don't wake up and we have 80% coming from out and they just flood downtown and we have a fire festival situation.
Correct.
And so we have been reaching out to some different marketing folks. We reached out to a company in Norman. The name of it has lost me, but we have talked about doing specific like display ad target marketing with them. They have volunteered to kind of in-kind donate part, like their part of like running it. But as far as paying for the ads, it's another like $5 to $10 grand that we obviously don't have right now. But it obviously would be helpful in those markets, and that's something that would help just our natural kind of growth that we've done with just our good reputation, with our good partnership with the city and other partners, and putting that story out there and bringing people in that way. Booking the right bands has been very important with that. And with most of us, except for Sherry being volunteer, I feel like with the marketing side, we've done a really good job of growing that voice and growing that reputation. And I do think that we're in a place now that we're grown up enough after 17 years to start looking at how do we grow that number sustainably, but doing it incrementally and doing it correctly. So I hear what you're saying, and I would love for 200,000 people to show up and blow away everything, and we have $1 billion of economic impact. But we want to make sure we do it
It's a really interesting point. Thank you, Cody, for that, because Cody, does bring up a good point. I was remiss in not saying we have some really great partners that give us some freebies just because they love us.
Yeah.
We've got a really robust partnership started with the newly rebooted Oklahoma Gazette, where they're going to be putting in big ads for us. The OU Daily is coming on board to help us do big outreach. We've got some other folks.
Yeah.
Sustainability of growth. So currently, the permitting system for a public event, and mostly this is an ABLE Commission issue, defines a very distinct perimeter that you can operate inside. With a distinctly defined perimeter where we can operate, there is a capacity issue. We would love nothing more in 10 years if we navigated all those problems and we start opening up all kinds of other spaces, because we would occupy every park in town and anybody that wanted to be a venue and make this a citywide operation and hire buses to get people to and from. That'd be fun. That's when we can get that'd be great. Now we're bringing double a game day size. We'll double the population of Norman on a weekend. We could do it. But sustainability is key. Making sure that we've got the capacity to handle the growth that we see. And right now, we had 4 billion with a B social media impressions for Norman Music Festival last year, with shares, reshares, comments, everything else. That's a lot of attention. If we take full advantage of that megaphone, we have an architecture firm that does the CAD drawings for all of our safety perimeters and everything we do downtown, who has done spatial analysis of what crowds we can safely hold downtown. We're not terribly far off capacity at this point without expansion. Expansion takes money. Money takes more sponsors. This is a free festival. More people does not mean, it means more money for the city, but it also means we have to go find another $100,000 in sponsors to make sure that we've got the capacity to build that container. We would love it. We just need the funding, right?
So
So sorry.
we're done. So 27K for just the container.
Correct.
22K-ish for financing, staffing, and
Yeah.
having pros on hand.
Correct.
Okay.
That's really where I had it.
That's
And
where
I'm
the
sorry, you had a
50K.
question too. We'll let you.
Councilor Montoya.
I understand, that Saturday you guys had to close because of tornadoes.
Correct.
So how did that have a financial impact on the
Okay.
festival? And what types of revenues did you all lose out on?
Very great question. So a long time ago, and I think you were on the board, you ran the finances, you know that it used to be the case that NMF made about 1/3 of its income on the festival weekend. It became very clear when I came on board, especially after 3.2 beer went away, which used to be a sales revenue source, that we needed to get to a place where this festival was 100% paid for before the first band hit the stage, and we were not reliant on day of income. Both because of weather and just the uncertainty of everything that might happen on a festival weekend. You cannot count on that revenue coming in for bills that you have already committed to pay. So we were there in 2020, we had every dollar raised, and then in March of 2020, we had to cancel because of COVID. And we sat on our hands and came back. We ran a loss in 2021, small one, luckily we sucked a little money away. We ran a smaller loss, and last year we had done it and had every dollar ready, and it canceled. So the only real revenue we lost out on the day was the sharing revenue that we got with our partner in Coca-Cola. We'd anticipated a new endeavor to be selling all the Coca-Cola line of products to our benefit. That's a sponsorship with Coca-Cola. They're giving us product to sell to help us generate revenue on our day. So we didn't get to do that. And because of a snafu and the way all that Coke got unpacked, we ended up paying a much bigger bill for I'm gonna be drinking Coca-Cola products for the next, I don't know how much, if anybody needs any Coke, I have a few cases on top of my dryer. So we had to pay for that bill, but I'm gonna tell you what stopped us from having any loss that we couldn't overcome. They were real tiny. We are lucky because everyone was so grateful that we did what we did on Saturday. From our suppliers to the stage people to whoever. We got little discounts and gifts that came from everywhere just to say thank you and we're sorry. So we ran a teeny tiny loss. But the really happy part is there was ARPA funding that had been allocated at the state level. It had been vetoed, but the legislature put it back in place. We applied for and were awarded it. Sadly, to date, of all the Norman organizations that were awarded funding, Norman Music Alliance is the only one to actually receive their check. Because it's all hung up in reporting. We were simple. We don't have a lot of employees or a complex organization, so I sent that report in early. Paid off that loan, and now we've got a surplus in the bank. So we're in a nice, solid financial position right now and didn't have to be very scared. However, because we've noticed the hesitancy in the market, I've done some things like I made the decision, we did as a board and staff made the decision a couple of weeks ago that we will not be utilizing the Sooner Theater this year. That saves us about $10,000 in funding as we're watching hesitancy from some of our donors. We've cut that as a venue. We'll keep all of our outdoor stages in the spaces where large crowds can gather. Hopefully put the Sooner Theater back next year. But minimizing anything we can right now to ensure that by the time we get to festival time, it's all paid for before the day of. That's our goal.
If you could put a dollar amount on the amount that you had to pay.
The
for
impact
the
last
loss.
year?
Yeah, what was the dollar?
So here's
Best
what I would say.
estimate.
If we hadn't had some folks who were so grateful for what we did that they forgave a few bills, we would have been in the hole to the tune of about $30,000.
Then conversely, do you know or are you aware of the financial impact since you had to shut the festival down? And
That's
I
right.
know how important the festival is to the downtowners, you know, bars, restaurants, retail.
Yeah.
Do you know how it impacted them that weekend? If you don't know, it's okay.
I have anecdotal evidence, but I don't have hard numbers, right? So
Right,
the
just based
anecdotal
on
stories,
conversations.
just so you know, many of our downtown businesses, particularly those that include themselves as official venues. And we, after we came back from the pandemic, NMF used to run those indoor venues. But we've now just said, we don't run anything for you and thrown the door wide open so that anybody inside our footprint that would like to participate in program, as long as you have some, basic criteria guidelines that we set out for those venues, and you get me your lineup by April 1st, we'll put you in the app. You are officially a part of the NMF lineup. Those venues, several of them tell us that on NMF weekend, the surplus that they get pays for their rent and bills over the summer. It's about 90 days worth of rent and bills, and most of them missed out on about half of that. It was a big impact to all of those downtown businesses.
And so just a comment on the documents provided.
Yes.
So I don't see a balance sheet, so please.
So I
no.
wasn't asked for a balance sheet, or I would have provided
Okay.
that, so I followed the checklist. If you want that, if they put it on the checklist
Yeah.
next time, and I can happily send it along
Okay.
if you'd like it.
So,
I
me
can do
too.
that.
Because in my, you guys know I'm a
No, I get
CPA, so financial statements to me is P&L, income statement, and a balance sheet.
Correct.
Those two
So
things together.
I almost included it, but I was like, no, I'm gonna follow the guidelines. They asked for a 990, which they hadn't asked for last year, so I included 990 and a thing, and I'm with you. I'd rather see a balance sheet. But I'm happy to send you one, because we're happy where it sits right now.
And I can imagine how shutting it down, hurt the festival financially, hurt the downtowners. And this is a very large ask, but just please plan ahead that this may not be able to be available next year. Because if you look at our
that's right.
budget, our general fund,
That's right.
our surplus is quickly disappearing.
No, I think all of us are very mindful of the fact that it is not just our sponsors that are skittish in this moment, and what that impact looks like for our cities and for all of those municipal budgets in the coming few years. We understand clearly that we have been on calls with the National Center for Nonprofits, the Oklahoma Center for Nonprofits. with Americans for the Arts and Oklahomans for the Arts. And every indicator currently about what's happening from the national level and trickling down is that all of us as arts organizations need to revisit any crisis plans we had in place for COVID and anticipate it being about twice as bad. It's not, we love this festival and we're gonna do everything we can to keep it alive. But as we look down the road of the next couple of years, given the moves that we see being made right now, it's not a given that NMF will be here.
Yeah, so,
It's not a given.
if revenues are impacted, definitely
right.
revisit your expenses.
Which is why I'm cutting everything that's not nailed down right now.
That's all I-
Absolutely everything. Yeah,
Thank you, Sharon.
absolutely.
Councilmember
Yes.
Dixon?
With that disastrous weather event, you all still ended up with 50 grand left over at the end of the year, kind of after the,
So that 50 grand was ARPA funding
Okay.
that came to us after. That was a separate grant. Those were awards from the American Rescue Act from COVID that was directed to help arts organizations recover like ours who had been shut down for 2 years without the ability to generate revenue or have programming. So this was funding that was allocated to help us recover from the pandemic. And we were very lucky at the timing. Otherwise, we would have been about $20,000 in the hole at this point in the world.
and it's free to attend, correct?
NMF is absolutely free to attend.
Are there any thoughts of just charging $1 day pass?
We cannot, and here's why.
Okay,
So we get this question all the time. And if anybody has if I could get $3 out of every single attendee's budget, we have no worries. Our most successful individual giving campaign last year, I made a joke to Cody about an old John Cusack movie from the 80s called Better Off Dead, where the paperboy walks up going, $2. And we snuck it into so many of our posts. And we got a few $1,000s in $2 and $5 and $10 donations. We need to do that again. But because we take place in a downtown footprint, the cost to the infrastructure it would take to be able to have entrance and exit gates, ensuring that everybody paid, plus attendees and staff at all of those places, a ticketing system to put all of that in place. Add that to the fact that our downtown businesses are not going to be very happy with me if somebody who wants to go have lunch at the diner is asked to pay $2 before they can get to the diner. So that makes all of that a real non-starter for something like NMF. We would very quickly, plus in the music festival industry, we've watched a lot of free festivals try to go paid because they think, man, if I could just get $5 out of everybody, it'd be great. What usually happens is this. If we've got 70,000 people and now I only charge $5, less than half of those people are gonna pay. So now I've recruited national level sponsors that I've promised a certain number of eyeballs to, that we're going to be putting their brand out in front of some eyeballs. And that halves once I charge. Then those sponsors get skittish. We have watched festival after festival go down like dominoes when they try to turn. The reason that Lincoln Calling and Lincoln, Nebraska called and asked for my consultation was because they have a festival in a downtown setting. And they pay, and they're trying to make it as cheap as possible. But they only get 1,500 people. And they're like, our businesses want those people you've got. How do you do that? And I said, well, friends, you've got to make it a free festival. I know that is just riding lightning every time you're doing a free festival, but that's what brings this economic return that we see. Because otherwise, we could absolutely make it sustainable, and I could go to a field somewhere near Lake Thunderbird and we could just have a 3-day mud fest. Don't think I haven't thought of it, because I really love a punk rock band and I'd like some mosh pits out in the mud. I would love it. Seriously, but to do what we do in a downtown setting requires a free festival so that people could just come and go because the businesses need access. Who else had a question?
Councilmember Gray?
Yes.
You do have a VIP option. Has
Correct.
that grown, or are people not choosing that?
It will now. So after we came back from the pandemic, in search of a space where we could put a really great VIP location, that was the quest. We put it over at the Well, and while it was a great room, it's outside the footprint. You have to walk away from all the bands. And the first year, everybody bought tickets, and the second year, we saw a real dip. and the numbers, and we're like, guys, it's location, location, location. So now with the addition of the really crazy, cool, uncanny art house downtown, we've partnered with them to create a VIP space where we can do more things like, this year we're adding DJ sessions with a silent disco. I've got potentially a couple of bands who are gonna come do some acoustic sets for the VIPs, a collaborative art project in that space. We can do more creative things in a space where we can operate a little more freely. So hopefully we'll see that grow this year.
And how much are those going for?
So there's 3 options for those passes. The first is if all you want is La Luz and Being Dead or your favorite bands and Stepmom and you want to go see them on the main stage, I love them. Then you can pay $100 and that is a front row pass that gets you right up to the front of those stages. If you want access to the VIP room and the front row pass and a free t-shirt and all of the snacks and the things, that's $200, which we think is a really reasonable ask. $300 and you have your own dedicated parking space for the weekend.
And are you seeing people, is that out for purchase right now?
It is out for purchase right now. We usually don't see an uptick in that until after spring break.
Okay.
Yeah, that's usually when people start making those plans. People right now are thinking about that week in March, and after that week in March, they'll be looking down the road to NMF.
But VIP.
The next thing, yeah.
VIP access, that's still like a small sliver of the budget.
VIP access is a small sliver of the budget.
Okay.
It is, on our best years, it's around 15 grand. That's on a really good year. It's about $15,000 for VIP passes.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Sure. Anything else?
Okay, thank you, Sherry.
You bet.
All right. Well, I would just say that we do know that although we have had record revenue coming in the last several years, which has allowed us to increase many of these budgets over the last few years, we have a little bit less positive of an outlook right now. So I would encourage all council members to think about these and let staff know if you want to include any of them in the budget or not. But I would just brace everybody that there may not be any increases potentially in this budget because of the projected outlook. But that'll be a discussion that council continues to have until June, until we make a vote on the final budget. But we'll have those discussions. I appreciate all of you coming to update us on your organizations, and I think they're all ones that we all support and would like to give more money to if we could. So we'll take this under consideration. Thank you very much. Okay. And item number 2, yes, Councilman Martin.
What about the Norman Economic Development Council?
So
what's
that will
the
come to you as a
status?
separate contract for council's consideration.
Okay.
Next Thursday, next Wednesday,
You don't meet on Wednesdays.
they're having the first ever as their economic development strategic plan laid out the regional approach to a Cleveland County coalition. They'll also have a new funding formula to include more Noble, Slaughterville on a per capita contribution formula, dollar per capita. So they'll be rolling out what that new contract will look like for council's consideration.
Okay, so the current contract that we have, where they're obligated to provide us with annual audited financial statements, is that going to change?
Wouldn't anticipate that changing at all. They did hire a new CPA firm. They finished the 2022, should have the 2023 done in March, and the 2024 is done in June, I believe, is the report from the CPA firm working on those audited financials.
Do we know who the new CPA is?
I just sent a request over for the name of the firm, and the auditor we met with in a Zoom environment on middle of last week, and got the update on the financials.
What's the delay in the audits? You know?
Oh, just a change in pretty much everything. so changes to the bylaws, changes in, banking, that everything has been changed and updated. I get, when I sit on the board, I get copies of monthlies and income statement and balance sheet. I wish our balance sheet was that heavily weighted to the asset side. But yeah, financially in good shape, and I'll have those reports out as the CPAs crank them out. We were on a Zoom call with the actual CPA working on the audited financials, and he was
So who's the CPA?
fuzzy. Yeah, so I'll text it to
What's the
you.
name of the firm?
Yeah, I'll text it to you.
Okay.
Yeah, I just sent the
Then,
request.
what else? Oh, I had another question.
I
So,
would say that NEDC is one of the agencies that are listed here, they just didn't ask for an increase.
right, but we also haven't seen audited financial statements since 2021. And what about their single audit? Do you know the status of that?
I don't think we had a conversation on the single audit. We did confirm the reporting from NEDC as it related to ARPA funding for the acquisition of the, what do you call, the incubator space, thank you, on Main Street. So they were able to report that back. So it will be part of their single audit for 2024.
Okay. That's all.
Question, okay, so, I am familiar with that inaugural Cleveland County Economic Development thing happening next week, I guess. What happens if it comes back and it is an ask above 125,000 and we're all sitting here like, oh, well, we don't know that we're really giving out money? Does that mean if we stay where we're at, we won't be a part of it?
I wouldn't imagine the world changing that dramatically in terms of funding formulas and the request. That opportunity to recognize benefits that our neighboring agencies in Cleveland County benefit from when new industry shows up in Cleveland County, and vice versa, wherever the jobs are.
So
We don't limit jobs to only Norman residents.
could go down if it's a countywide thing and everybody's paying in?
Possible, absolutely.
Okay.
So we've just never had any participation. It's always been the city, More Norman Technology, OU, and
Sooner.
the county, and the private sector through Sooners and Sharians.
All right, I was just curious.
Does that include South Oklahoma City also? Or south of 89th Street?
The Cleveland County portion, yeah, and I don't know if the funding formula is still just per capita. Who lives,
Because
what's
Norman
the number
is-
for the unincorporated area?
Norman's population is more than all of the rest of Cleveland County combined.
Yeah.
More in Noble and Slaughterville and Lexington. So,
And unincorporated.
but that chunk of South Oklahoma City that's in Cleveland County is pretty large.
And pays hefty amount of ad valorem too, so.
Councilor Nash?
I said, I probably should know this, but what is Norman Economic Development Coalition's mission statement?
The primary focus has been from the inception, Anthony may know about more of the history when it started up, is to create job opportunities on the industrial side. Job creators like Emmy and Top of the World manufacturing jobs as opposed to retail attraction. We do most of the retail attraction efforts in-house through Sarah Kaplan's efforts. More the coalition made up of the city of Norman and More Norman Technology, OU, and Cleveland County has acquired industrial park land over the years and been able to develop that and work on leads through the State Department of Commerce, including Hitachi was one of those big efforts. They went out and helped to recruit to Norman, that kind of thing. Help trying to raise the average annual income of families in Norman.
Okay, I get concerned when I see, look, we're not, maybe this is a question for legal, we're not allowed to give money to political organizations, right? And once the threshold of political activity Should it become a political organization?
So, oh yeah, I'd have to defer to Rick on that one. I know that, I mean, is Norman Economic Development Coalition, are they a 501c
I
nonprofit?
don't believe so.
No, okay. I'm not familiar enough with Norman Economic Development Coalition. It sometimes depends on the type of entity that they are, but I don't necessarily know if the city would have any barriers to funding a political organization. Potentially, I would assume there's something out there, but.
And one of those challenges is a project at any point could morph into, oh, it's a political thing as opposed to the project. An intent to attract a manufacturer, but they manufacture some hazardous chemical, and there's a big uproar about we don't want that particular manufacturer in our community. At what point does it stop being economic development for job creation and becomes, now it's political?
Yeah, so once they start having to lobby to get policy changed, I think the point where they should be pulling out and it shouldn't be, they shouldn't be getting that in depth with the way our government works. So like with the arena of the TIF, once it's outside of the realm of attracting business, trying to get people and change people's opinions and to get them on board with one way or the other, it's political. And I just want to make very sure that funding NEDC isn't funding a political organization to change our policy or the design of our city inappropriately.
Yeah, it's anticipated you'll get a new agreement, and those are absolute questions we can have Mr. Knighton and his team review before that's agendized for council action.
And I do know that just as the majority of the partners in NEDC are nonpartisan in nature, their activities also have to be nonpartisan. But as far as, policy advocacy towards something that would generate that clean employment sort of thing that they're trying to do, I think they could do that within their mission. They just have to stay nonpartisan. I think that's what their stated mission has always been.
Oh, yeah, and that's kind of putting together the mixture of federal and state laws on what constitutes political activity. Partisan is the heavy focus on state, but federal IRS, their designation of a political organization, any kind of lobbying to change policy doesn't have to be related to either party. So those are just my concerns on that. And I'd just like to make sure that before committing to continuing funding that we're not funding a political organization.
Yep, we'll have Mr. Knighton review for that confirmation specifically.
Yeah, that fully agree with their mission, what they're striving to do. Just, as long as they're not crossing beyond that threshold.
And I did have this thought with council's substantial investment in affordable housing. And we recognize council's ability to move the needle in terms of ensuring a fixed number of or a growing number of affordable units in Norman. There's probably a capacity limitation we'll reach, and we won't have resources. We won't have another 6 million from ARPA to invest in the next Crimson Flats kind of situation. So the other side of that equation, if you can't bring more units down into an affordable range, what can you do to bring the wages up into a wage that can afford the inventory that you've got in town? So council can approach the scenario of affordability from both fronts.
Speaking of Crimson Flats and that money, we have yet to create a revolving affordable housing fund with the money that would come back from that as it comes online.
Correct, from a budgeting standpoint.
Just, don't know if we can discuss
Oh.
that currently, but
Usually Brenda hits us in the
Stay on
head.
Good job.
a conversation worth having, for sure.
Absolutely. No, and budget time is a great time to have that specific
I'll just say
conversation.
this for the NEDC, looking on their website, trying to find out what their IRS status is, having a hard time. They say affordable lifestyle. I just point out that their data comes from 2019, which is pre-COVID. And they're saying the average home cost is 3.7 less than the national average. And they definitely should go back and
Update
update
census
for
data.
2025 numbers.
I would say that the ARPA is a really good example of where, one instance where they, you could say that they were advocating a political stance, because they certainly knew that the employment picture in Norman would benefit from the ARPA being approved. And they in fact benefited from it. So yes, they did argue for that.
That wasn't a pending Democratic decision or decision from the legislative body.
No, but I'm saying they did go to a legislative body and they advocated for that. I mean, they advocated when COVID was in place and raging. Emmy was significantly changing their business model towards testing for COVID, you'll recall. And NEDC knew that Emmy stood to make a lot of money and generate a lot of employment if they were able to successfully change their business model. So they advocated for that. Now, is that nonpartisan? I mean, there was certainly a partisan split about what should be approved in ARPA and what should be approved with COVID testing and that sort of thing. But I think in those cases, what they were advocating for was Norman businesses benefiting.
So, and Mr. Francisco, to that point, the thought of NEDC approaching the state in ARPA funding to seek an allocation of $20 million in state ARPA funding to go to the Oklahoma Aviation Academy. Great skill set coming out of that academy to qualify you to go to work at Tinker Air Force Base in one of, at the time, about 700 vacant positions needing these types of aircraft, airframe, all the elements in the industry. They could get trained through a high school program and hopefully, jump into a well-paying job without incurring a bunch of higher educational expenses. So in that instance, they went up to the state legislature and lobbied and were successful in getting those dollars moved back to Norman. So we'll have Rick look through those lenses in terms of is that political activity. I don't know how you, but Rick's smart, I trust him.
Councilman Dixon.
To Councilmember Nash's point, look at the Social Injustice League of Norman, or AKA Norman Caravans. Is that a political organization? Nobody from NEDC has shown up to a city council meeting and told anybody to go F themselves. Had to be removed for disorderly conduct, but Norman Caravans has. One advocates for businesses and one advocates for something else. Does it make them political?
They're a 501c3, so by definition for the IRS, they're not political.
But I don't know the difference between advocating for something that someone likes versus advocating for something someone doesn't like. Advocacy doesn't have to be partisan. So if NEDC, if we're gonna say that that's a partisan organization, well, I don't know how we don't say that, like, Norman Caravans isn't a partisan organization. So.
Well, it comes down to the capacity in which where the operators of caravans operating as individuals or on behalf of their organization. And I've got no problem with most of what NEDC does. I just want to make sure that they're not spending our own money to influence our government
To
or our
lobby
politics.
against the city.
Yeah, that's basically the only part. If it's a nebulous region on where the law is on what they can and can't do, then maybe we build in the contract that if it's gonna be an issue that's gonna be going in front of council, then that'd be an appropriate time to be spending tons of money to persuade people one way or the other.
Councilor Grant?
Just want to touch on the spending money part. So was it NEDC that helped pay the students to show up and pack out the council? Did we ever determine who paid those students?
Yeah, we were asked if the city of Norman paid students, and we did not. They indicated there was a student, I don't know if he's a grad student, that had organized for the students to gather, and that
So
student.
was it somebody employed with NEDC in any capacity or a intern?
Contractor, I think, yeah, independent contractor doing marketing or some
Because I do
function.
think that my constituents, and I think people throughout the city would be upset to learn if any of that money that paid students to pack out chambers came from, us through us giving money to NEDC.
And I do think there are two, and this is probably different than other agencies that the city of Norman funds, in that they may have activities related to the public sector funding of NEDC, and they also have a substantial component that's private funds, the Center Centurions, and they've got donors that are, participating at $25,000 a year in support of those activities on the private sector side too.
So when we get their, audits, we'll find out
Who those
who's
are,
funding
absolutely.
marketing, and if it's the city of Norman or private funding.
Yes, and the private sector board members based on industry sector and financial participation, you'll know which businesses are participating on the Center Centurion side as well, and at what level.
Okay, well, maybe the chair of finance might consider next month having NEDC come, and we can have a discussion about that further, or any other organizations. The Historical Museum wasn't here. If we want to know what their increase was for, or any other organizations. So if that's it, though, we'll go ahead and move on to the second item on the
If I
agenda.
may, Mr.
Yes.
Chair, could we do the number 3 first? I'm trying to
Oh,
pick up kids.
sure.
If
That's
that's okay.
Yeah. So discussion regarding monthly revenue and expenditure reports.
As you know, the February sales tax remittance was not positive. It was about -5%, and February is always one of our larger months. So that kind of locks us into a negative trend for this fiscal year. So as has been kind of the tone of this meeting, which I think is reflecting that, just know that that will be impacting on our budget decisions going forward, and what we, as we talked about during the mid-year review, shapes our kind of status for the rest of this fiscal year going into next fiscal year. And that's really all that I wanted to talk about, but I'll be glad to respond to any questions that you may have.
Councilor Montoya?
So in our last meeting, you had made a comment about we're gonna have to change the course of what we're doing. So what course
Yeah,
are we
that was a
changing?
long-term course.
Okay,
But the first step in that long-term course is next year's budget. And so just as we've been talking about, it's gonna be really hard to justify increases to these outside agencies. There are going to be some existing programs or some areas of contributions or areas of pay raises, that sort of thing, that we'll have to take a really hard look at in next year's budget as a first step in changing that long-term course.
One of the
Yeah.
things that you'll see, Your Honor, is on that specific note, last year we together walked through all of the requests for additional bodies in all the departments, and there were 100+ requests for Yeah, there'll be a large number of additional bodies requested, and we'll look long and hard about what we recommend, just so we stay ahead of that curve.
Do you know why February was so low?
I think it's just reflecting market. I don't think there was any real anomalies that we got from the tax commission. There were some anomalies in use tax, but nothing really related to sales tax. And as you'll see, our trends are kind of reflective of the whole state or the metro area for sure.
What is the anomalies with use tax, or what are they?
How much can I talk about? Okay, so last month we talked about the anomaly with NextEra. And so that kind of really shaped what was happening as we compared to last year with the huge use tax bump that we got from NextEra, and that went away. That was a one-time thing. There was another one-time thing that I don't think I can talk about right now, but just comparing this year to last year with use tax, there were some anomalies last year that went away. There were one-time things that did not reoccur, probably won't again, and that's use tax. Use tax is just volatile like that. Hopefully there'll be some big bump next month or 3 months from now that I don't envision right now.
It's basically people buying stuff online,
Yes.
and that tax gets remitted to us.
But it's
big
also
projects.
delivery of some large, project, some, materials for a large project like power poles for NextEra. And it's a multi-million dollars worth of equipment that we get 6% on.
So this isn't just like average consumer spending.
That's not average consumer spending.
Okay, so that's
Correct.
got it.
I would note, so February reflecting January was low, but it's still considerably higher than where we were at 5 years ago prior to 2020. It's way higher than the bars prior to 2020. And last month, reflecting December, we had our best sales tax revenue month that we've had in the last 5 years. So we have record revenue coming in, as we keep talking about every month, but we also know that salaries, benefits, the cost of running the city continues to rise even faster than our record revenue does. So it's one of those situations where we, some will say it's not a spending, it's a revenue, or it's not a revenue, it's a spending problem. It's both, because we have like record revenue, but we're, still struggling. So that's just something to note, that, we're still way above where we were at 5 years ago, but, so of cost. Councilman McGrath.
So some of the things we've talked about in the past that we'll have to take a hard look at, also like transit between the micro transit pilot versus.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the things that I would consider.
This is what you get with stability on council. On council, we get to have conversations and everybody remembers where we were. So that's tracking dead on with things that we're watching through the budget process, and that helps us shape our recommendations to you.
When does that contract end and we have to make a choice about whether we're extending it or not?
I think
Or
it's a
am I-
30-day notice contract. It might be a 90-day notice contract, but it's only a notice contract.
So we're just carrying it until we're like, oh, our budget's not looking so great. We might be better off in expanding a route versus keeping this.
And that's a great conversation to have, Taylor, and as one of the budget conversations to highlight that activity and look at dollars per rider to determine if that's the best bang for your transit
I
dollar.
know they're requesting it, that Taylor's putting that forward in the budget as a request to keep it going, but
And I guess it's too early to tell what kind of funding we might see through an RTA. Because basically our dedicated sales tax for transportation would roll into that.
Yeah, we're looking at likely a February or April of 26 vote for RTA.
well, and I definitely, half of our transit system is paid for through federal funding, and I definitely have concern about the new transportation secretary and some of the comments he's made about that, and how that funding may be allocated based on birth rates and different stuff like that, which, the way I've been reading it, would send more money to places that have a smaller population but might be growing at a faster rate than the bigger cities where the infrastructure is needed the most. So I just want to keep that at our forefront, just because half of the budget is from those funds, and then the rest being from our voter-approved tax. I think one of the things I would like to see, I think the whole council probably would want to see, is listed out what are the biggest causes of our budget issue, projected deficit, and what would be a list of things that we would be considering to cut, to actually, because cutting the social and voluntary services budget, that's not really going to make a dent in the projected loss. So what things would we actually be able to cut that would actually bring that down and keep it down, that type of stuff?
In between now and then, as we look at remaining runway for the current fiscal year, what you'll see before we get to June 30 is a slowing of filling of existing vacant positions, and with the lion's share of our budgets being bodies. And our goal would not get into a layoff scenario or a furlough scenario, but just manage the number of bodies providing the service as accurately as possible to make sure we do not bump into that next level of urgent budgetary reaction.
Okay. Any other comments, questions about that part? Okay.
Makes sense.
Okay, thank you. All right, the second or last item on the agenda is the discussion regarding the triannual audit, and we have our internal auditor here with us to have that conversation.
Good evening, council. Mayor-elect Holman, Chair of Finance Committee today, and Norman residents. Today I'd just like to present a internal audit draft, try to get some feedback from council, and just try to give you some context as to what this process entailed. So this triennial audit plan will cover fiscal year 25 through fiscal year 27. It's triennial for 3 years. During the risk assessment process, I've met with all 13 departments, their divisions and subdivisions. 2 of those departments are still ongoing. That would be the city manager and the planning department. They're dealing with aim forward and the land use plan, so they're really bogged down with their duties. And of course, city managers running around trying to create some business for the city. So I'm just being flexible with their schedules. Control self-assessments was the first phase, so I sent out 13 self-assessments to all departments for them to get with their teams at a round table and discuss all controls in the departments to address the principles or internal control principles that we try to achieve in internal audit and organization-wide. Sorry, I kind of skipped. So risk criteria that was defined for this risk assessment was appropriateness and comprehensiveness of documented policies, awareness and adherence amongst employees of those policies, and then effectiveness of preventative, detective, and corrective controls. So those automated controls that keep us from making mistakes is because we're human. Segregation of duties to prevent conflicts of interest. Sometimes with the lean staff, right, we kind of can get ourselves in situations where one person has multiple roles or permissions that create or increase the risk of fraud or error, and we try to reduce those conflicts. Automation and manual process dependencies. This so as we some of you may know, payroll and timekeeping are automated as they stand alone, but when it comes to connecting those two or integrating those two, it's a manual process, and it increases the risk for fraud or error while we upload that data into payroll to get people paid. Business continuity and disaster recovery planning was the last risk. This is because, again, lean staff, decades of tenure for a lot of our staff, and we worry about who will be the predecessor. Who will be the next person to step into that role once that person retires or resigns or has an unfortunate demise. Prayerfully, that doesn't happen to anyone. This, sorry, it's really blurry and very hard to see. So this is the audit universe. So what I did was top 10 focus areas, should be 13, based on input from City Council, Finance Committee, Industry Benchmarking, and the management team for the fiscal year 25 to 27 audit plan. That's in red. This is finance. So this is all of the functions in finance. I may have missed a few in some of them, but these are the areas that were considered for the risk assessment. So here we have payroll process, the top 10 are in red. So payroll process, payroll operations, P-card program, P-card policy, P-card process, the bank depositing process, and then personnel manual compliance, employee training and professional development, cultural and social responsibility, and timekeeping, but there's an overtime budget review bullet in there. And then public education program for recycling. The font in red is utility billing customer service. Green is utility billing customer service, workers' compensation claims and payments. And we have Whittier Activities Fund and Napa Fleet Parts Inventory. These four are just for council to consider their financial focus. Spoke to Mayor Heikela, he said, and I spoke to a couple of you about what your priorities are, and a lot of you said, to where's the money going? Where's the leaks in the boat? So I just wanted to, the green didn't necessarily come up as a top risk in the risk assessment, but it is a finance function in those departments. Special projects are in blue, so what I have is mileage reimbursement program. I had a couple counselors ask about auditing that as a special project. So I just wanted to make sure that that was considered. So we have all 13 departments: finance, police, legal, information technology, parks and rec, public works, human resources, utilities, planning, city management, city clerk, municipal court, and fire. So you can see yourselves, how big you are and all that you do, and much more. This is, again, only the things that were considered for the top focus areas for the audit plan. Okay. As scary as this may look to some of you, to me this looks great. Okay, so if I can explain this, here is the high risk areas, here is the low risk areas, right? So the majority of our auditable units ended up in a very low risk, right? So that says to me, this can be audited in fiscal year 27. Every 2 years, this is more of a moderate or medium risk rating, and this can be audited in 26. These are about 8 high-risk areas, most of them being in finance and HR. And here we have a breakdown of all departments. So city clerk has 3, that is in a low risk standing. Citywide, we have 1 that's in a high risk, 3 that's in the moderate, and 1 that's in the low. What I like, or what I gather from this, is that the majority of our functions are in a low risk. You are doing a great job, city. Keep what you're doing. For the HR finance, we have 3 auditable units that are high risk. For HR is 3 that are high risk, and utilities is 1. That'll be the recycling program, but it's pretty new, so probably hard to audit and get some data from. They rated it high risk because of funding and how volatile the recycling market is. So if we go forward, here are your audits, or the audits that have ranked the highest. Now, I looked at other municipal audit plans and I was quite jealous because theirs was much longer than mine, and I wanted to have a Christmas list that long. Unfortunately, the capacity for the current staffing of the Office of the City Auditor is 1. It is I, which means I am capped at 6 audits in 3 years. I don't like that number. So I sent the request to Kim for another auditor, and hopefully we can double that to 12 in 3 years. Okay, so I sent the ranking or priority ranking list to council. Got 2 from you all. That was Councilor Montoya and Mayor Heikela. So if you find that email, I can email it to you again. Please give me your feedback. I'm sorry. Yes, the order jams, y'all. I'm sorry. Okay, so citywide credit card usage. The objective of that is internal control effectiveness. So just to evaluate the approval workflows, transaction monitoring, and segregation of duties to prevent misuse or fraud. The significance of that is We have credit cards that are issued to departments and divisions without a clear owner. P-card programs, to reduce risk should be, credit cards should be, assigned to one single owner for audit trail and tracking and monitoring, right? So we can know who bought what and when they bought it and why.
And
we don't-
council, on that note, there are actually cities through the Oklahoma Municipal League and the City Managers Association and smaller agencies are recognizing that is low-hanging audit fruit, that if you use a different vehicle like a P-card, you can make your organization much safer. So we've got agencies calling us asking, what are you guys doing about that? We said, we're doing exactly what you're doing. We're all heading in the same direction as it relates to P-cards, the purchasing card program.
Yes. The P-card programs are contracted or agreed with banks or our current bank, or if they want to RFP with the new bank, that's possible as well. The anticipated value from this audit would be enhanced internal controls. Let's just back it up. So here, the small number, 5,592 hours. These are the hours available to audit for my single self. If we had another person, that number would double to about 11,000, right? The hours, so about 60% of the time, the total available time is allocated to scheduled audit services, and the remaining 30% or 40%, is allocated to other audit services, so unscheduled audits and investigations. These audits may very well result in an investigation, and investigations take precedence over audits because they are time sensitive. So if I happen to be performing one of these audits and I happen to see or identify red flags for fraud, I'm going to follow that breadcrumb trail, and is possibly going to lead me to some misconduct. And this or any of these audits will take a pause or a backseat to any investigation that is happening. Second one is the credit card process. So policy and procedure compliance. Assess whether credit card procedures align with city policies, procurement rules, and regulatory requirements. As it stands today, there is about 2 policies. It will be a very disjointed effort to perform this audit because we don't have a comprehensive P-card policy. But we do have a fraud policy in the HR manual, and we do have a misconduct policy, and we also have a procurement policy. So those 3 policies will be used to conduct this audit until we get a comprehensive P-card policy, which will also probably be a recommendation of this audit. So the significance, again, as I said, 50+ credit cards are issued to departments or division-wide without an implemented P-card program and or comprehensive P-card policy. It is very hard to audit something without a policy. If it's not in black and white, it doesn't exist. Enhanced compliance with the purchase of policy and implementation of a comprehensive P-card policy will be the anticipated value. For time, just multiply or divide this by 160 and you'll get a month. So this is 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. This is 6 months. These are high-risk areas where it says fiscal year 28. These are high-risk areas, but we don't have the capacity to do these audits. So the priority of them goes lower because the impact of them is a bit lower than compared to the other 7. So we have a payroll and timekeeping operations, as I've said before, the evaluate controls for preventing payroll fraud, unauthorized charges, or errors in payroll data. Just because the manual function between our timekeeping system and our payroll system, there is a manual upload, and for internal audit, that's an automatic red flag because now you have the ability to either edit pay or edit hours, and now we can have the issue. Anticipated value is enhanced internal controls. Again, for the timekeeping process, we want to increase the efficiency of the process. I do feel bad for our payroll accountant who has to do payroll for 800 people on a biweekly basis. And part of her job is manual, and I imagine that's very overwhelming for her. So we're trying to, the goal of this would be to enhance process efficiency, basically increase the amount of automated controls that is involved in the timekeeping and payroll process. Citywide overtime usage. This is a fun one. Cost control and budget impact. So assess the financial impact of overtime on department budgets and identify opportunities for cost reduction. As of right now, the significance for this is 4 departments account for a deficit of $3.37 million in the overtime expenditures from 22 to 24. Okay, so that's 3 years, 4 departments. And what this basically means is, although there was a budget allocated for overtime, it went over by 3.37 million. The anticipated value for this is cost avoidance and savings, is where I will spend most of the time during this audit period on that audit. Human resources, ethics, and control culture training programs, ethical awareness and compliance, educate employees on ethical decision-making, company policies, and legal obligations to prevent misconduct. The significance of that is harassment and discrimination prevention training, unconscious bias training, cultural competency sensitivity training, and occupational health and safety, or OSHA trainings, are currently being developed but have not been implemented citywide. Social and cultural programming, so those events that bring us all together from all of our departments to get to know each other and increase morale. Here is the objective, basically, is to increase morale. The significance is it's currently averaging a 25% attendance rate at social and cultural events when it's compared to all invitees. Human resources policy compliance audit is verified that internal HR policies are up to date and consistently applied. I do know that HR has updated the policy as of this year and is going through the approval process right now. So application of HR policies and procedures are modified based on discretion of the respective department director or manager. So what the anticipated value is, and that is enhanced compliance with city-wide HR policies. And down here at the other audit services, we have unscheduled audits and investigations, risk assessment, audit plan development. And as quick as, or as easy as we think this may be, this takes about 5 or 6 months. And then committees and advisory services is just my time and these committees at city council meetings. So I made sure to account for that for 3 years. And then fraud training program. So I will have to develop that at some point during the audit period to educate employees citywide on indicators or red flags of fraud or how to identify it. Next steps for the OCA is we have a overtime audit update next month. Pre-planning phase, we're currently in. Internal audit charter, written, still waiting for any feedback from council. Internal audit strategy completed, also will be presented next month. Internal audit policies and procedures manual, ongoing on page 45. See if we can get to page 60, and I'll be done. Implementation of case management software. We're currently scouting some software so that we can streamline the audit process and the audit plan. Since it's only one of me, I figured this is like another person. Implementation of continuous monitoring and analytics software. This is software, just kind of in conversation, but it's on my wish list. It's also in the budget request. Basically, it's a software that can attach to our ERP system to continuously monitor and provide analytics as to anomalies. So we can identify that fraud, those errors in real time or those anomalies in real time, and managers can do that from a department standpoint. So it won't just be the auditor looking at everybody. Everybody can look at themselves and be more proactive before the auditor comes and say, hey, I see something, right? The development of citywide fraud training program, as I've said, in the development of the quality assurance and improvement program for the audit. So everybody that's wondering who audits the auditor, other auditors. And next one, questions, feedback, comments?
In the event that an investigation does need to take place, can we hire a forensic auditor? Would that be cost effective or beneficial?
You hired one already.
Okay.
She's standing here.
No, I mean,
Yes, you can.
to support you, and
Yes.
that way it wouldn't pull you off of
Yes.
other audit tasks. Okay.
So my, if I'm granted that budget request, it would be a specialized auditor so that they can take a portion of the audit plan and I can deal with managing and other financials or fraud, and they can possibly take IT and compliance audits.
I'm just curious if it's more beneficial to hire them on an as-needed basis versus having another full-time employee that we have to manage all year for potential investigations that.
I should have did my strategy today. So in my strategy, I found there are possible ways where we can save money because third-party contracts just cost us more money. So the idea that I would have would be to hire subject matter experts so that we don't have to constantly look external and we can keep that talent in-house and those skill sets in-house.
That would be my next question would be similar along the same line. Could we hire a third party to do the low risk audits?
We could.
That way you're more focused
My
on.
strategy for that is those low risk audits can be conducted through consultations and reviews. So if you see that you ended up on a low of your divisions or your departments end up on a low risk audit, say, hey, what do we need to improve for that? Consult me. We can, I can review it and I give you some recommendations. And by the time the audit comes around, it's nothing to audit. So there's definitely ways of trying to deal with these low risk areas, especially with consultations and reviews and just being proactive about it.
And Councilmember Hinkle, this is just strange timing. Today, there was an email, and I'm trying to think of what agency it came from, and it said, here's a list of all the state-approved audit firms. And I thought, so they're on a state contract and public agencies can just call one right off the list and the procurement process has been handled through the state. It was a pretty big list. There were Oklahoma Metro firms in there, and then there were firms from all over the country, which I thought was pretty amazing. I don't know if Shakira saw that email, but I'll forward it to you. And there may be those kinds of experts already on the state contract, so it would be easy and fast to grab such a
Please
body
send me
would
that.
need.
Please forward me that email when you get the chance. Thank you. Last slide, 'cause I want to make sure that everybody knows how to contact me and what their responsibilities or duties are. Shakira Kalnick, city officer of the city auditor, city employees have a duty to report instances of suspected fraud, misuse, or theft of public funds or assets to the office of the city auditor, who will coordinate internal investigations with the appropriate officials, i.e. the city manager, the city attorney, and city council. And then we know that sometimes employees don't actually want to, come forward. So there is a way to anonymously report with the eBilly certified public accounting firm at 866-912-5378. Let's protect the city's assets. Okay. Any questions? Other questions, comments?
Is that Bailey, the firm from
Yep.
earlier?
They are Norman-based, I believe.
Yes.
They're by Westwood.
They have lots of offices.
Is there any areas that council does not see on the current audit plan that they would like to see? Special projects? Let me try and go to, sorry.
Just a thought, Council, when we were looking at all of the nonprofits and potentially 4 that are art-related, whether it's visual arts or music arts or arts, with the new hotel bed tax increase, the Norman Arts Council got a chunk of those new additional dollars. And if we think about how do we help those nonprofits achieve that mission, is an audit that we're not aware of that's been conducted, at least in the recent past, of hotel bed tax collections. It's primarily a self-reporting process by all of the hoteliers. The Airbnbs kind of get collected through a third party, so we've got extra eyes on those. But to make sure that hotel bed tax collection rate is what it needs to be, to make sure you can provide funding, to say whatever funding council may not be able to provide. You may have 4 on the list that you said that we think that meets the criteria for some of that new additional hotel bed tax, and direct them to the Norman Arts Council. Just a thought.
Any final comment, questions?
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Shakira.
So I guess I'll bring back the final draft to study session and then have it agendized for adoption.
Sounds good to me. Okay, any final comment from the committee members? Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for jumping in there, Jan. Appreciate that. Tuesday nights, games, updates.
Just for fun sometimes.
I saw you bring me down.
Yeah, I want to make sure you miss one.